Hello, BookTube people and book lovers everywhere. I'm going to be telling you today about 3 books that I read last month. The first book that I read or finished last month was Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by herself. It was written by a woman named Harriet Ann Jacobs, but in the memoir she chose a pseudonym. The pseudonym she chose was Linda, which happens to be my name. I was really surprised that she chose my name way back then. And every time I saw it in the text, it kind of made me start a little like, did that really belong in there? But never heard of a slave named Linda before. And so the story was that she was not beaten unmercifully by her slave owner. She was in a strange situation because the woman who was her original owner was very kind to her, but she left her as an inheritance to her granddaughter. Now, the granddaughter was underage, and the parents had to take care of this slave, Linda, or Harriet, as her real name is, and the father was obsessed with her and wanted her to set up a household with him in a remote place and do things that she didn't want to do because she was a very young woman. She was a teenager at the time and very attractive, and the father could not stop pestering her. And it was very uncomfortable for her, and the mother, the man's wife, was jealous. She was aware of what was going on, was very jealous, and so it was a very uncomfortable situation for Harriet. She ended up going into town where her grandmother lived. Her grandmother was a freed slave, and she lived in her grandmother's attic for over a year. Well, I think it was like 7 years. She lived up in a crawl space up there in the attic for a long, long time, and she could hear her own children playing downstairs. Well, she had 2 children. They weren't the slave owner man's kids. What she had done was to go into town and meet another white man, and she decided to have a relationship with him and bear children, and that was all to make her less attractive to the man who was pestering her that she really didn't want to have anything to do with. Anyhow, she had 2 children, and she could hear them playing downstairs while she was stuck up in that attic, but it was like 7 years. I mean, 7 years. Can you imagine being in an attic for 7 years? And eventually she was able to find a way to get to freedom. And so it was a pretty interesting slave narrative. I recommend it. Very, very heart-touching. The second book that I finished reading during the month of June was another one of the survival narratives that I have been reading. This one is called Island of the Blue Foxes: Disaster and Triumph on the World's Greatest Scientific Expedition. The author is Stephen Bown, B-O-W-N. And this was an audiobook for me, and it was about the first and second Kamchatka expeditions. They were led by Vitus Bering, and you probably know the name Bering because on the map there are the Bering Straits and the Bering Sea. So they are named after Vitus Bering, and he was the leader of both those expeditions. The second one was horrendous because they had to sail across the Bering Straits and go to America and research that area. They actually went to Alaska and further down along the coast. And on the way back, they didn't quite make it and got stuck on an island for a long, long time over the winter. The island had a lot of foxes, and the foxes were ravenously hungry and would not leave them alone. So that's why it's called Island of the Blue Foxes. And I found it to be a very interesting book. I've been reading a series of similar books that are survival nonfiction books, very fascinating. One of these days, I think I'm going to come out with a video to tell you about all the books that I read in this series. They're not really like a series all published together. They're just a series of books that I have personally read on one particular topic. So the third book that I finished reading, and to tell you about this book, I really have to put on the cowboy hat now. I didn't participate much in June on the Range, but I did buy a new hat, which I think is really awesome. It's felt. It's got feathers. It's got these feathers, and it's got a couple more that I can change over to that I haven't changed yet, but if I want a little different look, I can have different feathers. And it all came with this hat. And the hat is made of felt, and it's a big improvement over the straw hat that I was wearing the last 2 years. Now, the last 2 years, I went for the full Monte on the June on the Range, and I read one Zane Grey and one Louis L'Amour, but I didn't do that this year. I just felt like I didn't have time because I had other books that I wanted to read that were very important to me. And so I did not finish those other books, by the way, like this one, Heaven. That's a completely different story. I have not finished it yet. I have not given up on it, but I think that's what I'm going to be doing in July, is just catching up on books I didn't get to finish in June. So let me tell you about the book that I did read. I read one book for June on the Range. It was The Searchers, The Making of an American Legend, a nonfiction book by Gary Frankel. Well, the first half of the book was pretty much what I expected the book to be about. I expected it to be about the girl who was an Indian captive, who was the inspiration for the movie, The Searchers, and the novel, The Searchers, by Alan LeMay. So the first half of the book was about her. Her name was Cynthia Ann Parker. She was 9 years old when her Texas farm was invaded by Comanches, and she was kidnapped, and her older sister was kidnapped, but later died. And then also her parents and her brother were all massacred. So she went to live with the Comanches, and she was there for many years and ended up marrying there and having children there. And eventually she was rescued back, taken away from her Comanche home by rescuers and taken to her family, her uncle and other family members. I don't think she was particularly happy about that. She was rescued with her youngest child, a little girl named Prairie Flower, and she had 2 older boys that she missed terribly, and it was not a very happy experience for her at all because she was missing her sons. Well, she never saw her sons again, but one of the sons grew up to be very well known. His name was Quanah, and he was chief of a band of Comanches. And so the book not only told us about Cynthia Ann Parker and her little girl, but also told us about Quanah and his life, which was a very full and busy life. He went from being a Comanche to being like a legend as an Indian, doing tours of the United States and things like that. So very fascinating. But I got to the end of Quanah's life in the book, and as a matter of fact, I was not even halfway through the book. There was more to read, and the rest of the book was about the novel and the movie. So I learned details, many details about the novel that was written by Alan LeMay, and I also learned about his life, and then it went on to talk about the movie, focus on the producer of the movie, and the actor, of course, John Wayne. I learned more about John Wayne than I ever thought I ever would. And it was very interesting, and I actually ended up watching the movie. I had never watched the movie, The Searchers, before. Now, if I really wanted to make this trip into The Searchers complete, I would have to read the novel by Ellen LeMay. I have not done that yet, but I very much enjoyed reading this book, and also the movie. It was problematic in some places for a well-known reason. There was some prejudice, which was really annoying to a lot of people, but then a lot of people considered The Searchers one of the best movies ever made. So I watched it. That's all I'm going to say. I watched it and I read the book, and that was my June on the Range. Now, hopefully I have a little time left in this video and I can take you on a little tour of my garden that I filmed this morning. So thank you for coming and watching.